over 28 years. And after August the 28th, I got in touch with a few people who John knew, and he was, in Justin's words, a very particular kind of Englishman. He also had an Irish passport and a passion for exploring things British, English, Irish, and Central European. I shall miss him a lot. He was a good friend. I got in touch with Nick Wadham-Smith, who brought me and John together. He was responsible for British Cultural Studies at the British Council in London. I wrote to Nick just 2 days after you wrote to me, Eve, and he wrote this. I had the pleasure of meeting John nearly 30 years ago when he was a lecturer at Prešov University, Slovakia. This is a sad occasion, but I'm very grateful to be able to record here my gratitude to him for his pioneering work in the British Cultural Studies for the British Council. He always ensured that this topic had the broadest and richest definition. He often approached it through the perspective of Irish literature. One powerful effect was to show the dynamic between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, whereby the identities of both countries were illuminated. He was a superb organiser of meetings and conferences. For the one, Ian, that you mentioned in the High Tatras in 1997, he invited Justin Sullivan of New Model Army and the poet Jules Denby. From his first degree in Russian to his doctorate on Hungarian Slovak cultural issues and his work in Russia and Europe, he lived the intercultural life, which he continued to explore at the university in Oulu. And the British Council was extremely fortunate to have such a dedicated and inspiring teacher working to bring cultures together. Eve, you sent me Justin's WhatsApp, and I had a few messages with him. He was in Greece on a road trip at the time, and he wrote this for you. Yeah? I can't say I knew John well, but he always struck me as a very particular kind of Englishman, perhaps from a better, more free-spirited and outward-looking time. He seemed to possess an inquisitive mind, a fearless outlook, and a sceptical eyebrow raised towards all conventions and authorities. At the same time, he was able to apply a steadfast set of values of straightforward, no-fuss honesty and gentle humour to all the many situations, locations and societies that his adventurous spirit took him to. We first met when I was doing a wander around the new landscape of post-Soviet Eastern Europe in 1991, and through his knowledge of my band, New Model Army, I ended up in his modest flat in Miskolc with Eve and a very young Arkosh, showered with their warm hospitality. And a few years later, together with the poet Jules Denby, I was invited to attend a conference of East European English teachers in the Tatra Mountains. John typically thought it might be interesting to add a bit of artist input into an academic conference. The social weekend culminated in an excursion to the top of the beautiful snowy mountains, a memorable exercise in herding cats. I last saw him in Oulu as we stood staring out into the total whiteout of the frozen Bothnian Sea in February 2020, the landscape of infinity. I think what I'll most remember of John will be his way of connecting people and sharing with everyone. He was not concerned with showing off or putting himself above anyone. He seemed to have a love of life and of people and an egalitarian sociability that is the mark of special people. I wrote to Susanna Strakova at Prešov. Do you remember her? And she said, "We've just heard the sad news that John Braidwood, our former colleague and friend, has passed away. John had been teaching at our Institute of British and American Studies before 2007, before he moved to Finland with his family. Those who remember him from our institute all knew him not only as a respected scholar, devoted teacher, but also as a nice, kind, empathetic colleague with a fine sense of humour, friend, and an enthusiastic supporter of sports. John had always been willing to help anybody who needed it. I myself cannot forget how John and Eva, his wife, drove me from Miskolc to the Husa conference to the other side of Hungary, and how socially and emotionally enriching the trip was. John was simply a great personality and human being who does not deserve this fate. Although we've used the past tense, John will always stay in our hearts and minds, and we'll never forget what he has done for our university and how he has enriched our lives with his presence. May he rest in peace. I got in touch with Nada Fekri, his colleague who's now living in India. His wife is the director of the British Council there. And Nada wrote, "I have such fond memories of working with John in Slovakia and his and Eva's warm and generous hospitality when I visited them in Hungary in the late 90s. They made me feel so welcome, and after such a long journey by train and bus, a lovely glass of pear palinka made all the difference and revitalized my tired body and soul. The John I remember was a larger-than-life character who instantly energized whatever company he was in, be it small and cozy or large and imposing. He was kind, caring, thoughtful, funny, and mischievous in his sharp humour. I had many happy occasions with him in Prešov, Banska Bystrica, Bratislava, anywhere in Slaka. But he truly came to his own in the Magyarophone lands, and I remember him making the English language announcements on the Hungarian intercity trains. I learned much from him. We had a shared interest in Russian literature and linguistic exotica. I shall miss him dreadfully. I hope that the day goes as well as can be expected today, and is a celebration of his life and achievements, and the joy that he brought to his many friends, old and new, across many lands. Judy Elliott, I don't know if you remember Judy at all. This was a colleague who was in the Czech Republic. When I think of John, my abiding memory is of his warmth and friendship. We met when I was in Prague and he was in Slovakia, and there seemed to be a constant whirl of conferences or meetings in the region. And at that time, there were some big personalities within the group and numerous dramas. And John was gentle and calm amongst it all, which I really appreciated. And another colleague, Ruth, and I still share a laugh about our travel to a conference in the High Tatras that John organised. He asked me to meet an English academic in Prague and escort him along with our group on a night train across the border. Having never met this man, I managed to approach the wrong person and almost persuaded him to come on board as well. And after Prague, living in Newcastle, I was waiting for a train at West Jesmond metro station when someone hailed me from across the tracks, and it turned out to be John. We were both as surprised as the other to see each other there. We met that weekend with Ruth, who happened to be visiting me, had fun on the beach at Whitley Bay, and with the boys playing football, paddling, ice creams, back to his mum's for tea. And it was a special afternoon together, and I still cherish his mum's kindness and John's for including us in their family time. And I heard that John was working in Finland, and I hope he found happiness there with another fiendishly difficult language to get his tongue around. And my thoughts to John's close ones at this sad time. I'm thankful for the times I spent with him. Ruth was another colleague in Bulgaria. I was very saddened to hear of John's passing. We hadn't been in touch for some years. I remember him so very clearly as an all-round lovely guy, a dedicated family man and a good colleague from our days working with the British Council. And she also mentioned going to his mum's, where we were treated to high tea, warm hospitality. His mum was so lovely and welcoming, and it was all very relaxed, chatty, with lots of laughs over the sandwiches and cakes. A perfect Sunday tea time that was made complete with his mum's hostess trolley. We had a great time together with that Sunday afternoon. I'll never forget it. And I'll never forget John. I'm sending my deepest sympathies to his family at this sad time. You're all in my thoughts today, and I'll raise a glass to him today and probably sing Wild Rover while I'm at it. Love, John. And lastly from me, Mark, I first met John on a plane to Sofia from Budapest on our way to a British Council, British Studies get-together. And while we were there, we were invited to go to Moscow to do a winter school in January 1997. John had studied Russian, I'd studied Eastern European Studies, so we liked talking about the history of the region, and of course had to go and see Lenin in Moscow. I've got 4 of these copies for all of you, so you've got a copy, the 3 of you got a copy, and there's all the pictures in here at the different places. We ended up going back to Russia a year later, and John had me trudging through deep snow an hour away from Moscow on the train in search of the place where Lenin died. That was John. And the night train together in one compartment to Nizhny Novgorod was fun. We both got ill there, but John was always keen to explore unusual things, random statues in unusual places, and was always curious to find out more. And in August, 2 years ago, Eve, or Eva, drove John and me to Farkashleti Demeter, to the cemetery, opposite the flat that I lived in first, when I first came to Budapest in 1996, to look for the grave, or the final resting, do you remember? To look for the grave, or the final resting place of the Hungarian leader from 1947 to 1956, Mátyás Rákosi, who was born Mátyás Rosenfeld, and it was the place where his ashes were privately returned after his death in the Soviet Union in Gorky, which was Nizhny Novgorod, where we went, in 1971. And these were the things that made John who he was, and really what I loved about him. We went to Donegal together in Ireland. Some nice pictures of you there in the sea. He met my family. He took some wonderful pictures of my son Ronan. We watched the World Cup final together, the France-Croatia in the park in Budapest. Yeah, and he wrote these are quite special. Yeah? He wrote to me. He said, "Hello, old friend. I gather you know what's happened to me. Unbelievable. Right leg gone, about 12 centimetres below the knee. I'm fighting back and have now got over the crying and howling stage. Stumpy," that's what he used to call his leg, yeah? "Stumpy is usually well behaved, but certainly knows how to play up when he wants, like now. So old friend, take good care of yourself and Mickey," that's what he called my son, "and thanks for being in touch still. I'm in good hands here in Oulu, and I'm feeling a lot of love coming my way. How fortunate I am. All love to you and Mickey." And I wrote back, "Yeah, I've been thinking about you a lot over the last couple of weeks, John, and good to read that you're hanging in there. Lots of people love you and care about you. It must all have been such a shock. I'm just happy that you're alive and on the mend." And John wrote back, "Thanks, I did know and feel that you were thinking of me. I could sense it and even see you. Love, your dear friend, John, kiss, kiss." And I wrote back, Love you too, John, and looking forward to bringing Ronan sometime to see you. Big, big hug. Love from us both, and I've got a new phone, and I'm on WhatsApp again. Mark.